Hi there, I'm Peter Millard, and in the workshop this week we're going to take a look at how I go about measuring and marking up a carcass for dominoes when you can't use the pins or paddles for registration. That's coming up next. So one of the huge benefits of Festool's domino are these pins or paddles on the near machines that help you register off the edge of a board. It means there's less measuring, less marking, which in theory at least means fewer mistakes. It works really well, provided of course that your boards are all the same width and all the same thickness. That isn't always the case, of course, and what do you do when you have boards or a carcass that differs in width? Well, then you go back to working off pencil lines like an animal. And in this particular job, I'm going to show you how I go about marking that up to make sure that we make as fewer mistakes as possible. So this is a continuation really of the job that I talked about in the cut list cock-up videos. If you haven't seen those, go and take a look, because I go through this particular job and how I created the cut list for that job. The job itself is fairly simple, fairly straightforward in itself. 3 identical bookcases, 2 of which have to work together with a fluted face frame around them. In practice, so there's 3 identical carcasses, and it's how those carcasses are arranged and how they're constructed that makes this particularly challenging or irritating to design the marking out for the dominoes. We've got a full width top which overhangs the sides very slightly. Beneath that we've got 2 sides that run all the way down to the floor. Above that, off the floor by 50mm, because we're going to have a face frame on there, you've got a base that runs between those sides, and then there's a central divider that runs from that base to the underside of the top. To cap it all as well, all of these are different depths. The only common depths really are the sides are the same, the top is different, and the base and the divider are the same, set back slightly because there'll be a back on this as well. More of the back and the face frames later. In this video we're just going to try and figure out how we go about mixing domino registration marks in with pencil marks when you've got a variety of different depths of timber like this. So ignoring the back and the face frame for the moment, there's only 5 components to each of these bookcases. There's basically the base and the central divider, which are the same depth. There's obviously the 2 sides, which are slightly deeper, and then there's the top, which is slightly deeper and slightly wider because that has a very slight overhang on it. And to begin with, we're going to center up the base and the top and give ourselves a center line so that we know where that central divider is going to go. Now we know that there's a 18mm carcass underneath the top as well as a 6mm overhang, so I'm just using a scrap of 18mm carcass offcut plus a little bit of 6mm to center the base against the top, and we just check from both sides to make sure that that is absolutely centered. So with our top and base centered together like this, we know from our drawings the measurement of where the center should be, but that's easy enough to check with a simple tape measure. And then just to be double sure, we go at it from the other side as well. And there we are, one center line. And with the center marked on the base, we can extend that line all the way up through the top and back again, knowing that both those marks are identical. So now we've got the base and the top absolutely centered against each other. What I want to do now is put a mark on the underside of the top for where the dominoes are going to go for the sides. Now we know the sides are 18mm. Because the top overhangs by 6mm, I can't reference off the edge of that, so I will need to work off a pencil mark that's exactly half the thickness of the 18mm carcass. Now I've got a couple of pieces of 9mm, and I have checked against the carcass offcut that it is absolutely half the thickness. If you don't have a little scrap of 9mm hanging around, well, maybe you can use a 3mm packer and a scrap of 6mm offcut. That'll work as well, or just make it up from 3 3mm packers or a 5 and a 4 or whatever you need to do. But this will work really well, and all we're going to do, we put the 9mm offcut against the edge of the base, and then I'm going to use my little hinge drilling guide as a saddle square. I use this a lot. These are fantastic little products and I really recommend them. They're only a couple of pounds at most, and they're useful for all kinds of things, not just for drilling hinges. And with the 9mm offcut and the hinge drilling guide in place, we can simply put a pencil mark where that center line will be. So top and base are in sync. We've got the centre line marked for where the sides meet. We now need to start marking the domino positions for where they actually join together. And we're actually going to use the central divider for this, because although the central divider is only common in terms of depth to the base, we can actually mark that up, even though we'll use pins and paddles as references for that. We can actually put pencil marks on there and then transfer those pencil marks across for the sides and the top. And also, of course, we can use the central divider to give us a baseline for where the base will go as well, because working from the top down to the sides, this is where the base will meet. So the first thing we'll do is get the pencil marks on the central divider and on the base, and then we can transfer those across to the sides and the top. The domino machine puts mortises at 37mm centres when referencing off the pins or paddles, so I've set my sliding square to that distance to mark positions on the central divider and the base. Then, referencing off the front edge, I can transfer those positions to the top and bottom of the carcass sides. So next to do, while we're here, is to get the domino positions marked for the top. Obviously we need to do the centre and the sides, but we don't know exactly where they're going to come because it's both inset at the back and the front. But we do know, actually, because we know that we're going to have a 6mm overhang and a 12mm face frame from the front edge, so that's exactly the same as an 18mm piece. So with a couple of bench dogs, super dogs, on the bench, we can just use a couple of 18mm bits of scrap to bear against, and then use our hinged drilling template again as a saddle square just to mark those positions in. And with the centre marked, we can do the same at either end of the carcass top where the sides will join. Talking of the sides, here I'm referencing the central divider off the top of the left side, and again using our 9mm scrap as a gauge, marking the centre line of where the base will join, and extending the domino positions up to cross that line. So with the one complete set of components marked up, that's pretty much just ready to go. I've had to transfer a couple of the pencil marks across to the sides where you haven't got a point of reference, so I just use a sliding square for that, but that's only 4 extra marks. Everything else we can take off the set that we've got already marked, and we can put pencil marks on the guide rail and make little jigs and reference points so that we don't have to do any more measuring and marking. It's all either off the pins or off marks that are already on the guide rails, and that's what I'm going to do now. I'm using a couple of bench dogs with collars to keep the workpiece stable, then cutting dominoes in the top ends of the carcass sides and both ends of the central dividers. Then changing things around to cut the end dominoes in the longer carcass bases. With all the ends cut, I'm losing the dummy plate and moving on to the inboard dominoes. Starting with the carcass base, I'm using the MFT rail as a stop, centering the domino on the cut line and setting a flag stop to keep things consistent. And I'm using the domino pins to put the mortises in the right place on all 3 bases. So when it comes to doing the domino mortises in the tops, on the underside of the tops, we can actually use the guide rail stops for this because we're just doing one at a time, and there's space to get one, then one. And I've just set these up off the pencil marks to start with. I can do this like this, and I can do the end ones like that because we'll move it along. But when it comes around to doing the other side, I'm going to have to reset these simply because they're not equidistant on the sides, so between the front and the back. But that'll work. This will work really well and should make things nice and quick and easy. The rail stops make short work of the mortises for the central dividers in the underside of the tops. And then I can reset the workpiece to cut the mortises in the right-hand ends of the top for the carcass sides. In flipping the workpiece around to cut the left-hand mortises, the bench stop stays the same, but I need to reset the rail stops as the front and rear dominoes aren't equally spaced. But once done, they're quick and easy to complete. I've used the same principle to cut the mortises in the carcass sides to take the base. So there we are, that's how I go about measuring and marking out for these domino projects anyway, especially with multiples of the same item like this. Measure and mark up one very carefully, and then use that one to set your stops and your flags and your markers to make consistent repetitive results, and that way you get a workpiece like this one with not a single pencil mark on it anywhere. But that's it for this particular video, but not for this project. We've still got lots to come on this. You've got to cut the grooves in the sides and the top to take the back. We've got to cut the backs to size, and of course we've got to cut those fluted face rams as well. That'll be fun. But that's it for this video. They'll be coming in a future video, but that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.